Welcome back to my channel and to episode 2 in my patterning and fitting series. So as we discussed last week, I am doing this series from the angle of making your own Halloween costume because it is September. It's actually turned cooler here in Texas in the last week and it feels just a little bit like fall. I know some of you that don't live in the South would probably argue with me that it's not cool enough to be fall yet, but to us here in Texas it feels like fall is on the way. So I'm super excited about that. As you can see in the background, I have the supplies for my Halloween costume that I'm planning on making, the Edgar Allan Poe themed 1840s dress. I ordered the cotton sateen from Farmhouse Fabrics and it's arrived, so I now have all the supplies. However, for this pattern, I'm going to be drafting the pattern from my custom bodice block that I use for the dresses I make for myself. So I'm not actually going to be working on this dress during this episode because this episode is about adjusting a pattern to fit yourself from a store-bought pattern. So I'm going to actually be working on a different dress in this episode. I have a sibling who is getting married soon and I need a dress to wear to the wedding. I've been planning it for many months, I just haven't actually gotten it done. I am modeling it after Marilyn Monroe's dress. I'm going to make just a few changes. So hers has a halter top, and I do not like halter tops, mostly because I have scoliosis. That is, a lot of it is concentrated in my neck, and so halter tops create more pain there. So I'm going to actually be doing a bodice that sits on my shoulders as opposed to putting more strain on my neck. I need to fit that bodice to my body measurements. Typically, I wear about a size 10 in patterns when I take that measurement across the front here, like Nancy Zeman recommends in her book and like we talked about last week. But then I have to make the bust and the waist bigger. And I also sometimes have to adjust the waist length and actually make it slightly shorter. So we're going to be looking at all of those things today in this episode. So as we discussed last week, this is the book I consider to be the Bible when it comes to pattern fitting. This right-hand side one is the older version. This is the version I remember growing up with. And this is the newer version on the left side. Either version will do. I have not sat down and compared page by page, but in using both versions, I haven't found any major differences. I introduced you to this book in last week's episode and said if you were interested to order one, and one woman already let me know that she ordered one and will be ready for today's video, so I'm super excited to hear what she's able to do with it. I also wanted to announce that when my YouTube channel reaches 100 subscribers, I will be giving away a copy of this book because, as you can see, somehow I have ended up with 2 copies. So I will be giving away a copy. So if you like my video today, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe so that we can get to 100 subscribers and I can do this giveaway sooner rather than later. So that's the book I'm going to use. And then here is my fabric. So I found this already pleated fabric, which is just like the skirt in the Marilyn Monroe dress. Hers is white, of course. I'm making mine in a silver gray. And it was on clearance at Joann's. I found it last Christmas time. And then I found this on clearance at Hobby Lobby, and it matches very well. And I'll be using this part for the bodice. It is a crepe back satin. I dug around in my patterns to try to find a pattern that would work well for the bodice look I was wanting. If you look at her original bodice, it does have a V-neck, and so I was wanting to copy that look. It also has a wide band right below the bust. So I went digging through my patterns and I found this new look that was in my cabinet, and I think I'm going to go with look D and E. I'm not going to be putting the bow on it, but I like the bodice, and of course all of these have that band, and so I will be using the band. The skirt, of course, I'm not going to be using this skirt pattern. I'll be using the pleated fabric instead and just be cutting a rectangle for the skirt. All right, so I have gotten my pattern. I have pieces out. I have gotten out my book and I've actually already started the first step, but let me tell you what I've been thinking. So when I measure myself across the front, I know I just said that I'm a size 10, but I re-measure myself just to make sure, and I'm actually fitting in a size 12 shoulders, neck, and armholes right now. So when I look at this pattern, it says the finished garment measurements for the bust for a size 12 is a 35.5. Well, my bust is a 42, and it also recommends that you have 1.5 inches of ease. Now, I know that I like a little bit tighter clothing, so I don't want 1.5 inches in ease. I want 1 inch. So I want my finished bust measurement on this size 12 to be a 43-inch bust. So that means that I'm going to need to add 7.5 inches to my bust, and that 7.5 inches is going to be divided along 4 side seams, the 2 front side seams and the 2 back side seams. So if I divide 7.5 by 4, I am left with 1 7/8 inch. Now, when I'm altering a pattern, I do not want to pivot and slide more than 1 inch. So that means that for the 7/8 inch, I'm going to have to add an extension. So let me show you what both of those things mean. They're all explained in the Nancy Zeman book, which I've linked below for you guys. But I'm going to go ahead and show you how to pivot and slide first. So I'm going to pivot and slide for the first inch. So I'm going to take a pin, I'm going to put it at the corner right here of the shoulder to hold the 2 pattern pieces together. Okay, then I'm going to take my hem gauge. I'm going to measure out 1 inch from the existing side seam to add that first inch. And I'm going to take my pattern and I'm going to literally slide it. It's pivoting up there where the pin is holding it until the size 12 hits that new mark that I made. Now I'm going to weigh it all down again with my wonder weights, and I'm going to redraw the armhole. This is how you keep your armholes from getting too big, because if I just added extensions to my side seams, my armholes would get larger and larger under the arms and eventually be too large and gape too much. So because I pivot and slide, it keeps my armholes from getting too large. So I'm going to draw down this size 12, even though this is not going to be my final line, because I know I still have to add an extension. I also know I'm going to have to play around with this bottom edge of the bodice again and fix that in a minute. But my next step is to add an extension. An extension is simply to add 1/2 inch on the edge, 7/8 of an inch, whatever it is that you need. In my case, I need to add another 7/8 of an inch. So I'm going to take out my pen and pull out the pattern, and then I'm going to measure out 7/8 inch from this side seam all the way up. And then draw the line in place. And then I will draw out my armhole, my extension, and I will draw in my bottom of bodice. Now, because this moved out a little bit, this curve turned a little weird, I'm going to actually draw it down in a little bit because I don't want it to start curving, I don't want it to start curving down quite so soon. So I'm going to fix that. If you're ever unsure about this kind of thing and the book doesn't exactly tell you, or my video doesn't exactly tell you, I recommend that you just find an old piece of fabric you have, a cheap piece of fabric, an old sheet, anything will do, and go ahead and cut it out and fit it to your body. In this case, this bottom edge flares out so much because it's gathered to that midriff band. And this should be okay. I've sewn enough of them that are shaped like this, and I'm pretty sure that it should work fine. So let me lay the two patterns side by side so you can see the difference of before and after the alteration on the pattern. You can see how this one, the armhole kind of curves up more. That's how you keep your armhole the same size as the original armhole size, so your armholes don't get too big. You can see this one goes out more straight. So that is the major difference here in between these two pieces. So now we are going to do the same thing with the back bodice. And it's going to actually have an added challenge because I also need to adapt the waist on it, which I'll explain in a minute. All right, so I have done the same thing with the back pattern piece that I already did with the front one. I traced on the size 12. Put these wonder weights there so the paper doesn't curl up as badly. I have pinned in the top of the armhole for it to pivot and slide. Now this has a very low back because there is a strap that runs up right here. So I don't have as much armhole to work with right here. So once again, we are going to pivot and slide for our first inch. And then we are going to add an extension of 7/8 of an inch on the back side seam as well. And that will give me the full 7.5 inches that I need for this dress. So here we go, I pivoted. I'm going to put down my wonder weights to hold this in place. I'm going to trace out this size 12 armhole. Trace down the side seam. And I'm going to pull this pattern out. So if I take this and lay it, like if I want to kind of figure out how to draw along this bottom part, I can kind of lay it in the middle and then kind of follow the curve up so that it's not dipping down in the middle of my back, it's dipping down more at the side seam where it needs to be. We'll talk about that more in just a minute. We're going to finish this side seam though. So make sure, I think I forgot to mention this, make sure you trace any markings you need to from your original pattern. So like in this case, I traced the 2 dots that I'm going to need for the shoulder straps, where to put the straps. So make sure that you're doing that as well when you're tracing these. All right, so there's my armhole. And then I need to add the 7/8 of an inch extension. So I'm going to come out here, I'm going to draw 7/8 inch. All the way down. I actually need my French curve for this. It's a little longer line. Drawing my new side seam, my final side seam. I'm going to draw out my armhole to that extension. I'm going to go ahead and erase my old pivot and slide side seam. Now, if you're not having to add more than an inch, you're good. You're not going to have to do this extension step that I'm showing you, but I did want to show you because I'm sure there's many other women out there that have the same issue as me that are having to add that. I measured the midriff piece. So my waist is 35 inches and I want about an inch of ease. So I want a 36-inch waist. I measured my midriff piece, and after seams it is 18 inches, which is perfect. That's half of it. I'm going to cut it out at this size 18. That should work perfectly fine with the bodice that I redrew. And so I'm not going to actually alter this piece. I'm just going to cut it a larger size. And because of the way the cut of this piece, it should work just fine. So that I'm going to keep the way it is. but I do need to add some to the waist on the back. When I measure the back of the waist at a size 12, after seams, it's only going to be about 7 inches on each side, so 14 inches. So I do need the back to also be about 18 inches in order to fit my waist and have the ease that I need. So that means I actually need 2 inches added to this side seam. So if I measure out from the 12, and this is how she shows to do it in the book as well. If I measure out from the 12, 2 inches, I'm not going to need to go as far out as this line goes in, which means this line is now going to have to slant in. So I'm going to actually have to draw this line yet again. I'm also going to take this piece and let me lay it underneath because it's a little easier to see because I'm not using the largest size. So let's lay it underneath here, and I need to draw out the side seam because of the way that this bottom line curves. I don't want to mess up the bottom of my back bodice. So I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to keep the top edge seam matched up. Right along there, and I'm going to pull this out until the size 12 matches that new line that I made. And then I'm going to trace. Basically, I want to make sure that this is 2 inches away from that line too. So I'm measuring to make sure, yeah, it's 2 inches away. So I'm going to trace across the bottom of this to kind of extend this out so that the bottom of my bodice fits correctly. All right, so let me show you the altered bodices side by side with the originals. You can see the original here. You're looking at the size 12, which is the third line. It's this line right here. As you can see, my new one curves up much more in the armhole, which was accomplished when we did the pivot and slide. That's to keep your armhole the same size, so your armholes don't get too large. And then, of course, it has that extension coming out from the armhole to make it fit my bust line. And then, of course, I redrew along the bottom as well to accommodate the extra length along the bottom of the bodice. So I actually just realized something with the bottom of the bodice, and this is a trick you can use, because I determined that the size 18 midriff will fit for my midriff. Then what I can do is I can actually use this size 18 line to draw in, and actually if you look, I'm pretty close with what I kind of sketched in, but I can use that as a guide to draw in and make an accurate bottom line so that I don't have to make a mock-up. And then you can see the back bodices side by side. You can see that once again the armhole curves up slightly more, the back side is extended slightly more. Also, I could have, now that I am looking at this, use the size 18 line to mostly help me draw an accurate curve along there. So if you have a bodice that is large enough at the waist, you can use that line to help you draw in. If you don't, then you just kind of have to sketch it in like I originally did. So that's how they look side by side after I have altered them. Once again, thank you for joining me. I hope this has been informative for you on how to alter your bodice to fit your bust and waist. The books that I'm recommending, the Fitting Finis is the older version. Patterning and Fitting with Confidence is a newer version. Just look up Nancy Zeman to find these. I will also link them below. But these books also show you many other ways to alter. So, for example, when I changed my armhole and added the extensions, I would also then have to change the sleeve to correspond if I was making a dress that had sleeves on it. I'm making mine sleeveless, so I don't have to worry about that, but if you are, her book will show you how to make those changes to the sleeve. If you need to adjust a dress for the hip, which I don't have to do that in this case because my skirt is so full, that's not an issue. but if I did need to do that, she also will show you how to do that. The tips and all the different ways to alter in her books are endless. I highly recommend them. I cannot recommend them enough. I've also linked the pattern paper below for you if you're interested in that. You can also use just like gift tissue paper. There's several different types of pattern paper out there. If you are looking for something that doubles as a mock-up, I believe it's called Swiss tracing paper, and I'm pretty sure Farmhouse Fabrics offers it. I will look for it, and if I can find it, I will link that below in the description box as well. It's not paper, it's more of a fabric-y substance, and so you get more of an idea of what it's going to fit like. You can actually sew it together and see kind of what it's going to fit like. And I used to use a lot of that when I was in my earlier years of sewing, and I was still experimenting with a lot of different things. So that is a great option as well, because then you can just pull it back apart and use it for your pattern, because it's stiffer than most fabrics, but it's more durable than paper. So if you have any questions, as always, let me know in the comments below. If you have enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Remember, when there are 100 subscribers on my YouTube channel, I will be giving away a copy of Nancy Ziemann's book. So stay tuned for whenever there's 100 subscribers and the giveaway announcement. If you are looking for costumes, historical costumes that are ready made, please check out my Etsy shop below, and you can always find me and follow me on social media. Thank you so much for watching, and I will be back next time with a video on pattern hacking, or Franken patterning, on how to combine pieces from multiple different patterns in order to create the look that you have imagined.